The signal came at the worst possible time. Ambassador Velshan Auric was standing in his private chamber on Thessa Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Concord, when the alert flashed across his crystal display screen. He was tired, and his translucent body flickered with the pale blue light that meant exhaustion among the Aeluri. His species was fragile, thin, crystalline beings who could shatter from a hard fall. And the last thing he wanted was another emergency. But the universe did not care what he wanted. The alert was from the Deep Signal Monitoring Division, a forgotten little department that most people in the Concord pretended did not exist. Their job was simple: listen to the dark corners of the galaxy and report anything strange. They had not reported anything interesting in over 6,000 years. Until now. Velshan opened the file and read the summary. His body went still. The pale blue light inside him turned white, which among the Aeluri meant that the emergency was serious. Aeluri meant only one thing: pure, absolute fear. A structured signal had been detected coming from the Sol system, specifically from the third planet orbiting a small and unremarkable yellow star. The signal was not random noise. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was organized, repeating, and unmistakably artificial. Someone, or something, on Sol 3 was broadcasting into space. And Sol 3 was a death world. Not just any death world. It was classified as a Class 12, the highest and most dangerous rating the Concord had ever given to a planet. The file on Sol 3 read like a horror story. The planet had extreme axial tilt, which meant its weather shifted violently between burning heat and freezing cold. Its surface was covered in water that could crush anything under its pressure at depth. Its atmosphere was made of oxygen and nitrogen, oxygen being one of the most corrosive and reactive gases in the known universe. The planet had active volcanoes, earthquakes, massive storms, and an unstable magnetic field that sometimes flickered and let deadly radiation pour in from its star. And the life there was worse than the planet itself. Sol 3 was crawling with predators, millions of species designed to kill and eat each other. Every ocean, every forest, every desert, every frozen wasteland had something waiting to hunt. The planet had experienced at least 5 mass extinction events, each one wiping out most of the life on the surface. And yet somehow, life kept coming back, angrier and more stubborn than before. No one in the Concord had ever expected intelligence to arise on Sol 3. The planet was supposed to be a death trap, nothing more. It had been placed on the Quarantine Systems Registry thousands of years ago and forgotten. But now, it was calling out to the stars. Velshan contacted the Council immediately. The Galactic Concord Council was the governing body of over 4,000 species spread across the Orion. Arm. They had maintained peace and order for 90,000 years. They were wise, careful, and very, very slow to act. But when Velshan presented the signal data in the great circular chamber of the council hall, the reaction was instant. Chaos. Representatives of dozens of species began speaking at once. The Melori, soft floating beings who communicated through light pulses, flashed red in alarm. The Thessic, tall insectoid creatures with clicking mandibles, clattered their jaws in distress. Even the Yanari, ancient tree-like beings who rarely spoke at all, shifted their massive root feet and rumbled with unease. Everyone in that chamber knew what a Deathworld species could mean. The last time a Deathworld species had achieved spaceflight was 60,000 years ago. The Krethvar, a race of massive armored reptilian predators, had clawed their way off their hellish homeworld and immediately begun conquering everything around them. It had taken the meeting, combined military strength of 300 Concord species to stop them. The war had lasted 2 centuries and had nearly destroyed the Concord itself. No one wanted to go through that again. Archon Dreth Vaughn was the first to call for action. He was the supreme military commander of the Concord Defense Fleet, and a Krethian himself, one of the very species that had descended from those ancient Deathworld conquerors. He was enormous, covered in dark metallic armor plates that were part of his own body, and his voice was deep enough to vibrate the floor when he spoke. "We know what Deathworld species do," he said, his red eyes sweeping across the chamber. "They fight, they conquer, they destroy. We should not wait for these creatures to come to us. We should go to them now and end this before it begins." Several council members murmured in agreement. The fear in the room was thick enough to taste. But Velshan stepped forward. His small crystalline body looked almost comical next to the towering Archon, but his voice was steady. "We do not know what these beings are," he said. "We know their world is dangerous, yes. We know their biology will likely be extreme. But we do not know their minds. We do not know their intentions. If we destroy them, without even trying to understand them, then we are no better than the threats we claim to protect the galaxy from." The chamber went quiet. Drethvan stared down at him with those burning red eyes. "And if they are like the Krethvar, if they come for us with fire and rage, then we will know," Velshan replied, "and we will act, but not before, not without evidence." The debate lasted for 3 full days, an eternity by council standards. In the end, the vote was close. Velshan's position won by a margin of only 12 votes out of nearly 4,000. The council authorized a contact observation mission. A stealth diplomatic flotilla would be assembled and sent to the Sol system to observe the species, assess the threat level, and if possible, make peaceful first contact. Velshan was chosen to lead it. He spent the next several weeks preparing, studying every piece of data the Concord had on Sol 3 and its dominant species. The data was old and incomplete, gathered by automated probes that had passed through the system thousands of years ago. But what little existed was enough to keep him awake at night. He learned that the dominant species called themselves humans. 2 legs. They had forward-facing eyes, the mark of a predator. They were covered in soft skin, but had dense bones and powerful muscles. Their bodies could heal from injuries that would kill most Concord species. And they lived in organized groups numbering in the billions. Billions. A single species, billions strong, on a single death world. The flotilla departed from Thessa Prime on a cold, quiet morning. 5 ships, each one equipped with the most advanced cloaking and shielding technology the Concord possessed. The journey to Sol took several weeks at maximum transit speed, and with every passing day, Velshan felt the weight of what he was about to do pressing harder against his crystalline chest. When they finally arrived at the edge of the Sol system, they dropped out of transit and activated full stealth protocols. The ships went dark. No emissions, no signals, no movement. They drifted in silence and turned their sensors towards Sol 3. What they found made Velshan's light go white again. There were thousands of artificial objects orbiting the planet. Satellites, stations, debris fields from what appeared to be multiple generations of spacefaring attempts. The humans had clearly been reaching for space for some time, and not always successfully. There were scars up there, evidence of failures, explosions, and disasters, but also evidence of relentless persistence. They had failed and failed and failed, and they had kept building. And the signals, the radio chatter pouring off the planet was overwhelming. Thousands of transmissions in hundreds of distinct languages, all from the same species. Music, speech, data, arguments, laughter, screaming, all of it blasting outward into space, with no concern for who might be listening. Velshan stood at the observation window of his ship and stared at the small blue world glowing in the distance. His crew was silent behind him, every one of them frozen with the same mix of awe and terror. "They are not just alive," Velshan whispered, his voice barely audible. They are loud. And somewhere down on that bright and terrible world, 8 billion Deathworlders went about their day, completely unaware that the galaxy had finally noticed them. The Concord flotilla spent 14 days watching Earth from the shadows, and every single day brought new horrors. Kethri was the one who suffered most. He was a small insectoid biologist from the Thesic species, about the size of a human child, with 6 delicate legs, 2 large compound eyes, and mandibles that clicked softly when he was nervous. They had not stopped clicking since the flotilla arrived. His job was to compile a biological profile of the dominant species, and the more he learned about humans, the more he wanted to turn the ship around and go home. He presented his findings to Ambassador Velshan and the observation team in the flotilla's central briefing chamber. His voice was thin and shaky, and his legs kept folding under him as he spoke. They are persistent predators, Kethri began, pulling up a visual display showing humans running across open grassland. They do not ambush their prey like most predators in the galaxy. They do not use speed or venom or camouflage. Instead, they simply follow their target, and they do not stop. They walk and run for hours, sometimes days, until the prey collapses from exhaustion and heat. Then they kill it. The room was silent. Their skeletal structure is dense and reinforced, he continued, his mandibles clicking faster. They can break bones and heal them. They can lose entire limbs and survive. They can lose blood, significant amounts, and their bodies will produce more. They have a practice called surgery, where they cut themselves open with blades, reach inside their own bodies, repair or remove damaged organs, close the wound, and then recover. This is considered routine. One of the Aeluri sensor officers made a sound like cracking glass, which was the Aeluri equivalent of gagging. Kethri kept going. Their skin is soft, but their muscles are dense and powerful. They can lift objects many times their own weight in emergencies. Their reflexes are fast. Eyesight is sharp at distance. Their hearing covers a wide range, and they have an extraordinarily high pain tolerance. They can continue fighting, running, and thinking, even while severely injured. He paused and clicked his mandibles 3 times, which meant he was about to say something he really did not want to say. They also consume neurotoxins recreationally. Velshan leaned forward. What do you mean? They eat a chemical called capsaicin. It triggers pain receptors and makes them feel as if their mouths are on fire. They enjoy this. They drink ethanol, a solvent that damages brain cells and impairs motor function. They call it relaxation. They consume caffeine, a stimulant that would stop the heart of most Concord species, every single morning. Some of them inhale burning plant matter directly into their lungs for pleasure. Nobody in the room spoke, but the most concerning thing, Kethri said quietly, is their bonding behavior. Emotional attachments to almost anything. Other humans, other species on their world, machines, places, ideas, even imaginary beings. They will sacrifice their own lives to protect things they love, not just their offspring, anything they have bonded with. I have observed them risk death for animals that serve no survival purpose. I have seen them weep over broken machines. I have seen them fight wars over abstract concepts they cannot even see or touch. He looked at Velshan with his large compound eyes. Ambassador, I do not think this species is simply dangerous. I think they are the most dangerous thing this galaxy has ever produced. And I think the most dangerous part of them is that they do not see themselves that way at all. The briefing ended in heavy silence. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening much closer than any of them realized. The UESS Endurance was a deep space patrol frigate, one of humanity's early vessels designed for long-range exploration. Beyond the solar system, it was not large by any standard, and its crew of 42 was small. But its captain was not. Captain Rena Mwangi was a tall woman from East Africa with close-cropped hair, steady hands, and eyes that never seemed to blink when something important was happening. She had been a combat pilot before taking command, and she ran her ship the way she ran her old fighter, tight, fast, and ready for anything. The Endurance was on a routine sweep near the Kuiper Belt, the cold, dark region at the edge of the solar system, when the sensor officer flagged something unusual. "Captain, I am picking up an energy signature at bearing 77 Mark II. It does not match any known human vessel or natural phenomenon." Wangi turned in her chair. "Can you identify it?" "No, ma'am. It is faint but structured. It almost looks like a power signature being actively suppressed." Wangi was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then she said, "Take us in. Slow. And steady. Full passive sensors. I want to see what is out there before it sees us." The Endurance changed course and crept toward the anomaly. Aboard the Concorde flotilla, alarms began to sound softly. A sensor officer rushed to Velshan. "Ambassador, one of the human vessels has altered course. It is moving toward us." Velshan felt his crystalline body crack slightly along one arm. A stress fracture from fear. "We are fully cloaked." "I do not know, Ambassador, but they are coming directly at us. Their approach is slow and methodical. They are scanning." Velshan looked at the display showing the small, angular human ship creeping through the dark. It was ugly by Concorde standards. Blocky, heavily armored, covered in antenna arrays and what appeared to be weapon mounts. It looked like it had been built by someone who expected the universe to try to kill them, which, he realized, was exactly the case. For nearly 2 hours, the Endurance circled closer, while the Concorde flotilla sat frozen in silence. Velshan ordered absolute stillness. No signals, no movement, nothing. But it did not matter. The human ship kept coming, adjusting its course each time as if it could feel them in the dark. Finally, Captain Mwangi made her decision. "Light them up," she said. "Active sensors, full sweep. Let us see what we are looking at." The Endurance blasted the area with a pulse of active energy. Powerful active sensor pulse, and the Concorde flotilla lit up on her screen like lanterns in a dark room. 5 ships, alien in design, sitting right on humanity's doorstep. The bridge of the Endurance went very quiet. Dr. Yuto Tanaka, the ship's xenolinguist, a thin man with round glasses and a habit of talking to himself, nearly fell out of his chair. He had spent his entire career preparing for a moment he never truly believed would come. "Captain," he whispered, "those are not ours." "No," Mwangi agreed, and her voice was calm as stone. "They are not." On the Concorde flotilla, panic erupted. Velshan's officers urged him to flee, to engage engines and run before the Deathworlders attacked. But Velshan stood still, his cracked arm glowing with pain, and thought about what Kethri had said about humans. They bond with anything. They will die for what they love. They do not see themselves as monsters. He made his choice. "Decloak," he ordered. "All ships drop stealth and transmit the universal peace signal on all frequencies." His officers stared at him. "Now," he commanded. The 5 Concorde ships shimmered into visibility, their elegant silver hulls gleaming against the black of space. The universal peace signal, a simple mathematical sequence that any intelligent species should recognize as non-threatening, began broadcasting on every channel. On the Endurance, Tanaka nearly broke his console trying to record everything. "Captain, they have decloaked. They are transmitting. It is a mathematical sequence, prime numbers, basic arithmetic repeated in a loop. It is a greeting, Captain, it has to be." Wangi stared at the 5 silver ships floating before her, beautiful, alien, and real. She had dreamed of this since she was a girl, looking up at the stars from Nairobi. "Can you respond?" she asked. Tanaka was already working, his fingers flying across his console. "I can mirror the sequence to it. Extend the pattern. Show them we understand. Give me 60 seconds. It took him 40. The Endurance transmitted its reply, the same mathematical sequence, extended with the next logical steps, followed by a simple binary greeting, that Tanaka had designed years ago, just in case this day ever came. Aboard the Concorde flagship, Velshan watched the human response appear on his screen. His cracked arm forgotten, he translated the mathematics and felt something he had not expected. The humans had not attacked. They had not run. They had answered, quickly, intelligently, and with what could only be described as enthusiasm. First contact between humanity and the Galactic Concorde did not happen in a grand hall or a historic ceremony. It happened in the freezing dark between Neptune and Pluto, between a terrified crystal diplomat and a grinning human captain. Mwangi opened a broadband channel, and Tanaka worked furiously to build a basic translation framework. The first coherent sentence that crossed between the two species was clumsy and imperfect, but it was clear enough. "We have been waiting for you," Mwangi said, and her voice carried a warmth that made Velshan's light flicker in confusion. "Our whole history, we looked up and wondered if anyone was out there, and here you are." Velshan did not know how to respond to that. Most species reacted to first contact with fear, aggression, or submission. Humans, it seemed, reacted with joy. And that, he realized, might be the most terrifying thing about them of all. The news reached Thessa Prime before the human delegation did, and the galaxy did not take it well. Within hours of Velshan's official report being filed, the information leaked, as it always did, in a civilization of 4,000 species with no shared concept of secrecy. The message spread across every communication network, every trade route, every colony and outpost in the Orion Arm. A Deathworld species had achieved spaceflight. The humans of Sol 3 were real, they were intelligent, and they were coming. 3 species began immediate evacuation of their border worlds. The Mallory Collective suspended all interstellar travel and sealed their home system behind a wall of defensive stations. The Yanari, who moved so slowly that they rarely reacted to anything within a single century, uprooted themselves and began migrating deeper into their forests, which for the Yanari was the equivalent of screaming in terror. On the communications networks, the reaction was even worse. Millions of messages flooded every channel. Some demanded the humans be destroyed immediately. Others called for the council to be dissolved for allowing this to happen. A small but growing number, mostly younger members of species that had never known war, expressed cautious curiosity. But they were drowned out by the fear. Against this backdrop of galactic panic, Ambassador Velshan managed to broker something remarkable. He convinced the council to allow a small human delegation to travel to Thessa Prime for a formal diplomatic meeting. It had taken every favor he had ever earned, every argument he could construct, and a fair amount of what humans would later teach him to call bluffing. The humans sent their best. Secretary General Adeze Okonkwo was the leader of the United Earth Systems, the governing body that humanity had slowly and painfully built over centuries of war, failure, and stubborn hope. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair, dark skin, and a gaze that could make generals look at their shoes. She had grown up in Lagos during one of Earth's last great resource conflicts, and she understood something that most galactic leaders did not. The difference between power and strength was whether you could choose not to use it. She brought with her a small delegation, 12 humans in total, including Dr. Tanaka as translator, a security team of 4 soldiers, and several diplomatic advisors. They traveled aboard a Concorde escort vessel, as no human ship had the range to reach Thessa Prime yet. The journey took 3 weeks, and during that time, the Concorde crew aboard the escort vessel learned several important things about humans. First, humans did not sleep in a single long cycle like most species. Instead, they slept for roughly 8 hours, then stayed awake for 16, then slept again, on a loop, endlessly, for their entire lives. The Concorde crew found this deeply unsettling. It meant humans were always either awake and active or about to be. Second, humans ate constantly, multiple times per day, and the things they ate were alarming. One of the security officers was observed consuming a bright red fruit that Kethri later identified as containing low levels of cyanide compounds. When asked about it, the officer shrugged and said it was called an apple. Third, the humans laughed, a lot. They laughed when things were funny, but also when things were frightening, stressful, or painful. This confused the Concorde crew enormously. Dr. Tanaka tried to explain that laughter was a social bonding mechanism and a stress response, but this only made it more unsettling. A species that responded to danger by making loud, repetitive sounds with their mouths while baring their teeth. The escort vessel arrived at Thessa Prime, and the human delegation disembarked into the main diplomatic station. The problems began immediately. Thessa Prime's gravity was roughly 4/10 of Earth's standard. The humans, who had evolved under a crushing gravitational pull, suddenly found themselves light, fast, and dangerously strong. Secretary General Okonkwo stepped off the transport ramp and nearly launched herself into the ceiling. She caught herself on a railing and bent it slightly with her grip. The Concorde officials waiting to receive her took 3 steps back. The delegation was escorted through the station toward the council chambers, and every step of the way, the differences between humans and the rest of the galaxy became more obvious. The corridors were designed for species that rarely exceeded 50 kilograms. The humans, averaging 70 to 90 kilograms of dense muscle and bone, made the floors creak. The air on the station was thin and carefully controlled, optimized for the delicate lungs of a dozen fragile species. The humans found it tolerable, but bland, like breathing at high altitude. Then, the sneeze happened. The security officers, a large man named Kowalski, felt a tickle in his nose from the unfamiliar air. He sneezed once. It was a single, ordinary human sneeze, a sharp, explosive burst of air at roughly 160 kilometers per hour. 3 Aluori diplomats who were standing nearby collapsed. Their crystalline bodies vibrated at a frequency that disrupted their internal structure, and they had to be carried to a medical bay. 2 Malori flickered out completely, their bioluminescent bodies going dark in what was later described as a light faint. Kowalski apologized repeatedly. The humans were mortified. The Concorde officials were horrified. By the end of the day, the entire human delegation had been reclassified under hazardous contact protocols, which meant that any physical interaction between humans and Concorde species required a safety buffer and a medical team on standby. Secretary General Okonkwo shook hands with Elder Threnvos, a senior council member of the Ynnari species. During the formal welcome ceremony, she used what she considered a gentle grip. Threnvos's branch-like appendage cracked audibly. The elder made no complaint. The Ynnari were stoic by nature. But after the incident, a quiet advisory was circulated to all council members. Do not let the humans touch you. Despite all of this, the formal hearing proceeded. The council chamber was vast and circular, with tiered seating rising in every direction. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of species filled the room, and at the center, alone under a harsh white light, stood Adaeze Okonkwo. Archon Dreth Vaughn spoke first, as was the military's right when a potential threat was being assessed. He stood across from her, 3 meters tall, covered in dark armor plates, his red eyes glowing. "You come from a world of death," he said, his voice rumbling through the chamber. "Your biology is extreme, your history is violent, your species has weapons, capable of destroying your own planet. Why should we trust you?" Okonkwo looked up at him. She did not step back. She did not flinch. She let the silence stretch for a moment. Then she spoke. "Because we have already been through the worst," she said, "and we chose to survive it together." She told them about humanity, the real story, not the sanitized version, not the heroic version, the truth. She told them about the wars, World wars that killed millions. Civil wars fought over the color of skin or the name of a god. She told them about the atomic bombs, how humans had split the atom and immediately turned it into a weapon that could erase cities in seconds. She told them about climate change, how they had poisoned their own atmosphere and nearly destroyed the ecosystems that kept them alive. The chamber was deathly silent. Then she told them the rest. She told them about the treaties, the peace accords, the slow, painful, imperfect process of learning to live together. She told them about the doctors who ran into burning buildings, and the volunteers who fed strangers. She told them about how humans had looked at the damage they had done to their own world, and decided, not all at once, not easily, but stubbornly and relentlessly, to fix it. We are not perfect, she said. We have never been perfect. We have hurt each other and our world in ways that I cannot defend. But we are still here, because every time we fell, someone reached out a hand and said, "Get up, we are not finished." She paused and looked around the chamber, at the thousands of alien faces watching her with fear, curiosity, suspicion, and something that might have been the beginning of respect. "We are not asking for your permission to exist," she said. "We are asking for the chance to prove that we can be trusted. That is all." The chamber erupted in noise, clicking, humming, flashing, rumbling, every species processing her words in their own way. Archon Dreth Vaughn leaned forward. "And if we decide that the risk is too great? If the council votes to seal your system and quarantine you permanently, what then?" Okonkwo met his gaze without hesitation. "We would survive," she said. "We always do. But I would rather we did not have to survive you." The Archon stared at her for a long time. His red eyes burned, but he said nothing more. The council could not reach a decision that day. The vote was deferred, the debate would continue, and the human delegation was given quarters on the station. Carefully reinforced quarters with extra structural support and thicker walls. But as the chamber emptied, Velshan noticed something that troubled him deeply. Archon Dreth Vaughn had left quickly, speaking into a private communicator. The old crystal diplomat had seen that look before. The look of someone who had already made up their mind and was not going to wait for a vote. That night, in the cold silence of deep space, a covert fleet of Concord warships changed course. Sol. Just in case. The Vraxith came without warning, as they always did. For centuries, the Galactic Concord had kept a secret from most of its citizens. On the far rim of the galaxy, beyond the mapped trade routes and the comfortable colony worlds, something terrible had been growing. The Vraxith Dominion, an empire of biomechanical horrors that operated as a single hive mind, had been pushing inward, consuming everything in its path. Entire worlds stripped bare, their ecosystems devoured, to fuel the Dominion's endless expansion. The Concord had been fighting a slow, quiet war against them for over 300 years. The defense fleet held the line at the outer border, but barely. Every decade, the Vraxith pushed a little deeper, took a few more systems, grew a little stronger. The Concord's leaders knew the math. They were losing. They just did not want anyone else to know. And then the border broke. A Vraxith incursion fleet, larger than any previously recorded, tore through the outer defense line in a single devastating assault. 47 colony worlds went silent in less than a week. The signals simply stopped. No distress calls, no evacuations, just silence. A Vraxith did not leave survivors. Archon Dreth Vaughn received the reports on Thessa Prime, and for the first time in his long military career, his armored hands trembled. The outer fleet was shattered. The reinforcements he had planned to send were weeks away, and the covert fleet he had secretly positioned near Sol, his insurance against the humans, was now desperately needed elsewhere. He had no choice. He recalled the Sol fleet immediately and redirected every available ship to the crumbling front line. But it was not going to be enough. He knew this. The Concorde fleet was not designed for this kind of war. They built ships for patrol, for peacekeeping, for deterrence, not for survival against an enemy that ate worlds. Their weapons were precise and elegant. Their shields were efficient. Their tactics were careful and calculated. The Vraxith did not care about any of that. They came in swarms, bio-organic ships that healed from damage, adapted to weapons after a few engagements, and never ever retreated. They had no fear, because they had no individuals. The entire Dominion was one mind, with one purpose: consume. Ambassador Velshan watched the reports come in from his quarters on Thessa Prime. Each one was worse than the last. He saw footage of Concorde defense platforms being overwhelmed, Vraxith boarding creatures tearing through corridors while Concorde soldiers fled in panic. He saw colony worlds burning, their skies dark with Vraxith landing spores. He saw the desperate, hopeless faces of commanders who knew they were already dead. And he made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. He went to the human delegation. Secretary General Okonkwo was in her reinforced quarters, reviewing the same reports. Thought to restrict human access to their information networks, and Dr. Tanaka had been quietly monitoring everything since they arrived. She already knew what Velshan was going to ask before he said it. "We need your help," Velshan said. His light was dim, nearly gray. "The Vraxith are coming, and we cannot stop them. I am not authorized to ask you this. The Council has not voted on it. I may be committing treason by being here. But if the front line falls, there will be nothing between the Vraxith and the core worlds, including your system." Okonkwo studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Give me 1 hour." She contacted Earth using the Concorde's faster-than-light communication relay, and within minutes she was speaking with Fleet Admiral Han Song-jin, the commander of Earth's combined defense forces. Han was a quiet man with gray temples and careful eyes, who had spent 30 years preparing for threats he hoped would never come. Asked, "The worst kind of bad," Okonkwo replied. "They are losing, and they are running out of time." Han reviewed the tactical data Velshan had provided. His face remained calm, but his jaw tightened. "Our fleet is small by their standards. 48 combat-capable vessels. We have never fought in space against an alien enemy. We have no experience with their tactics, their biology, or their technology." "I know," Okonkwo said. "We could lose everything. I know that too." Han was quiet for 10 seconds. Then he said, "We did not come all this way to hide. Mobilize everything." Earth's fleet launched within 72 hours. The ships were not beautiful. They were not elegant or graceful like the silver vessels of the Concorde. They were angular and heavy, covered in thick armor plating and bristling with weapons. They had been designed by a species that lived on a world where everything, the weather, the terrain, the wildlife, even the planet itself, was trying to kill them. Every system was redundant. Every hull was over-engineered. Every weapon was built to hit hard and keep firing, even when the ship was falling apart. Captain Rinam Wangi stood on the bridge of the UESS Endurance and watched the fleet form up around her. 48 ships, frigates, destroyers, 2 heavy cruisers, against an enemy that had just destroyed a fleet 10 times that size. She should have been afraid. She was grinning. "All ships," she broadcast, "this is Captain Wangi. We are about to enter a combat zone against an enemy that has never lost a battle. Our allies are retreating, our odds are terrible, and we are a long way from home." She paused. "Sounds like a Tuesday to me. Let us go introduce ourselves." The human fleet arrived at the Battle of Sentinel Reach, a critical Concorde defense point, where the last major fleet was making its stand. The Concorde ships were battered, their formation collapsing, their commander sending increasingly desperate messages to Thessa Prime. Then 48 ugly angular ships dropped out of transit directly into the heart of the battle. The Vraxith turned to engage them, expecting the same result as always: fragile ships, fragile crews, quick kills. They were wrong. The first Vraxith weapon salvo hit the UESS Jakarta, a heavy cruiser, square in the bow. The blast would have cored a Concorde capital ship. But the Jakarta shuddered, vented atmosphere from 3 compartments, sealed the breaches automatically, rerouted power around the damaged sections, and returned fire with a broadside that ripped through 2 Vraxith swarm ships. Human ships were not built to avoid damage. They were built to take it and keep fighting. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Vraxith adapted their weapons, as they always did, shifting frequencies, changing attack patterns, probing for weaknesses. The human ships adapted right back. Their crews rerouted systems on the fly, improvised repairs in the middle of combat, and changed tactics every 20 minutes. The Vraxith hive mind was fast, but it thought in patterns. Humans thought in chaos, and chaos was their native language. Then came the boarding actions. Human Marines, volunteers all of them, launched themselves at a Vraxith hive ship in armored drop pods. No Concorde species had ever survived inside a hive ship. The interior was a nightmare of organic tunnels, acidic fluids, razor-sharp biostructures, and swarming combat drones. The Marines went in anyway. They fought in darkness, in toxic air, in corridors that shifted and closed around them. They sealed their suits, turned on their helmet lights, and pushed deeper. They used kinetic weapons when their energy cells ran dry. They used blades when their guns jammed. They used their fists when the blades broke. One squad leader, a woman named Sergeant Torres, killed a Vraxith combat drone by grabbing it, slamming it into a wall, and beating it with a piece of its own broken limb. The Vraxith hive mind had consumed thousands of species across its long existence. It had never encountered anything like this: prey that did not flee, soldiers that did not break, beings that seemed to fight harder the worse things got. For the first time in anyone's memory, the Vraxith hesitated. Captain Wangi saw the opening. Her ship, the Endurance, was damaged. Hull breaches on 3 decks, 1 engine offline, half her weapons gone. But the Vraxith flagship, a massive dreadnought at the center of their formation, was also wounded, crippled by concentrated fire from the human fleet. Wangi made a decision that no Concorde captain would have considered. "Helm," she said calmly. "Ram it." The Endurance accelerated straight at the Vraxith dreadnought at full speed. The Concorde ships watching on sensors could not believe what they were seeing. A ship, crewed, occupied, alive, deliberately driving itself into the enemy. The collision was enormous. The Endurance hit the dreadnought at an angle, tearing through its bioorganic hull and burying itself deep in the monster's body. The impact shattered half the Endurance's remaining structure and knocked out every system on the ship for 11 seconds. Then, the backup systems kicked in. Wangi, bleeding from a gash on her forehead, pulled herself back into her chair. "Reverse engines! All power to rear thrusters! Get us out of this thing!" The Endurance ripped itself free of the dying dreadnought, trailing fire and debris, its hull screaming with structural warnings. And as it pulled away, the dreadnought broke apart behind it, and the Vraxith formation shattered. Without their flagship, the swarm ships lost coordination. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Vraxith retreated. The battle footage spread across the galaxy within hours. Every species, every world, every station and outpost watched the same images. Human ships absorbing punishment that should have destroyed them. Human soldiers boarding a hive ship and surviving. A human captain ramming her own vessel into an enemy dreadnought and pulling it back out again. And they watched the aftermath. The human crews cheering, laughing, crying, embracing each other on their battered ships. Not celebrating victory exactly. Something deeper than that. Celebrating survival. Celebrating each other. Watched the footage alone in his quarters. He watched it 3 times. His light shifted through colors he did not have names for. The galaxy had spent weeks debating whether humans were too dangerous to be allowed among the stars. Now they had a different question. Were humans dangerous enough to save them all? The silence after the Battle of Sentinel Reach was louder than the battle itself. For 3 full days, the Galactic Concord Council did not convene. No votes were called. No debates were scheduled. The representatives sat in their quarters and private offices, watching the footage from Sentinel Reach on endless repeat, and tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The Vraxith had retreated. That alone was enough to reshape every strategic calculation the Concord had made in the last 3 centuries. The enemy that had been slowly devouring the galaxy's edge, the enemy that had never once turned back, had broken formation and fled. And it was the Deathworlders who had made them run. On the damaged human ships still holding position at Sentinel Reach, the aftermath was messy and painful and very human. Captain Rena Mwangi sat in the medical bay of the Endurance while a medic stitched the gash on her forehead, without anesthesia, because they were running low. And she insisted the more seriously wounded crew get priority. She did not flinch. She had a cup of coffee in one hand, and she sipped it while the needle went in and out. The Endurance had lost 9 crew members in the battle, and 31 were injured. The ship itself would need months of repair. Its forward hull was crushed. 2 decks were open to space, and 1 engine was fused into a lump of melted metal. But it was still holding together, because human engineers had built it to hold together, even when everything went wrong. Across the human fleet the numbers were grim but survivable. 3 ships lost entirely, 8 more heavily damaged, 147 dead, over 400 wounded. For a fleet of 48 ships that had just fought the most terrifying enemy in the galaxy, the survival rate was remarkable. The Concord fleet commander, an elderly Fesic admiral named Quirith, contacted Mwangi on a private channel. His voice was quiet, and his mandibles barely moved. "Captain," he said, "in my career of 112 years, I have never seen what I saw today. I have no framework to understand it. My officers are shaken, not by the Vraxith, but by you. I must ask, because I genuinely do not understand. How did you survive?" Mwangi thought about it for a moment. Then she said, "We grew up in a place where everything was trying to kill us. The weather, the animals, the ground under our feet, sometimes even the air. We did not get to choose a safe world. We got Earth. So we learned to take a hit, get back up, and keep moving. It is the only thing we have ever known." There was a long pause. Then Kirith said, "I think I am beginning to understand why the galaxy is afraid of you." "I hope," Mwangi replied, "that one day it will not be." On Thessa Prime, the political landscape was changing faster than anyone had predicted. Fear of humanity remained. That was not going to disappear overnight. But it was now mixed with something new. A grudging, uncomfortable, but undeniable gratitude. The Concord had been losing the Vraxith War for 300 years. In a single battle, a species that most of the galaxy had wanted to exterminate had done what 4,000 species could not. That carried weight. Archon Dreth Vaughn requested a private meeting with Secretary General Okonkwo. It was held in a small conference room, just the 2 of them, no aides, no translators. Okonkwo had learned enough of the Concord common language by now to manage a conversation, and Dreth Vaughn spoke slowly for her benefit. The Archon did not sit. He stood at the window, looking out at the stars, his massive armored body blocking most of the light. His red eyes reflected in the glass. "I ordered a fleet to your system," he said bluntly. "Before the Vraxith attack, I positioned warships near Sol as a precaution in case the Council voted against you." Okonkwo nodded. "I know." He turned to look at her. "How?" "Because it is what I would have done," she said simply. Dreth Vaughn studied her for a long time. Krethians did not apologize. It was not in their nature. Their species had its own death-world history, and they had survived by being harder than everything else. They respected strength, not words. "Your people fought well," he said finally. "I have commanded fleets for 60 years. I have never seen a species fight the way yours does. Most species in the Concord fight to not die. Your people fight to protect each other. There is a difference." Okonkwo said nothing. She waited. "I will not insult you by pretending I am not still wary of your kind," Drethvon continued. "A species forged on a Class 12 death world is not something any rational being should dismiss. But I will say this, I would rather have you beside me than against me." "That is all we have ever wanted," Okonkwo said. "I know," he replied. "That is what concerns me most. Beings who want nothing but friendship are either fools or the most dangerous creatures alive." He paused. "You are not fools." Despite herself, Okonkwo smiled. The council convened 5 days after the battle, and the session was unlike any in living memory. Debate. The resolution was presented, and the vote was unanimous. All 4,012 member species in agreement for the first time in over 900 years. Humanity was offered full membership in the Galactic Concord. But Okonkwo did not simply accept. She stood at the center of the chamber, this small, aging woman from a broken and beautiful world, and she negotiated. "We are honored," she said, "but membership alone is not enough. If we are going to be part of this Concord, then the Concord needs to change." The chamber shifted uncomfortably. "No more quarantine systems," she continued. "No more writing off entire worlds because they are dangerous. Life finds a way on those worlds, just as it found a way on ours. There could be other species out there, on other death worlds, struggling to survive, reaching for the stars, wondering if they are alone. If we had been found 1,000 years earlier and judged too dangerous, we would never have had the chance to be here today. Every sapient species deserves that chance." The council debated this for several hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. Humanity had just saved the Concord from its greatest enemy. The least the galaxy could do was listen. The reforms were adopted. The quarantine systems registry was abolished. A new first contact protocol was established, one that prioritized understanding over fear, patience over preemptive action. Humanity would lead the effort, with Concord support. Velshan was appointed as the first Concord Human Liaison Ambassador, a role that placed him at the bridge between two civilizations. He accepted with quiet pride and more than a little terror. In a private moment after the ceremony, he found himself standing beside Captain Mwangi, on an observation deck, overlooking Thessa Prime's silver cityscape. Her forehead was still bandaged, and she held another cup of coffee, her third that day. "When I first read the file on your world," Velshan said softly, his crystalline body glowing a gentle amber, "I thought it was a horror story, a world of fire and poison and predators, a place where nothing good could possibly grow." Mwangi looked at him and waited. "I was wrong," he said. She smiled, that strange human expression that showed teeth, but meant warmth. "It is a horror story," she said. "We are just the monsters who learn to love." Velshan's light flickered, and he made a sound that the Eluwuri used for gentle laughter. "I think I understand humans a little more every day, and every day I understand them a little less." "Welcome to being human," Mwangi said. "We do not understand ourselves either. That is part of the fun." Months later, Kethri, the small, nervous Thessic biologist who had been so terrified of humans, published his complete dossier on the species. It covered their biology, their history, their culture, their psychology, and their extraordinary, contradictory nature. It was peer-reviewed by scientists from over 200 species, translated into 9,000 languages, and distributed to every corner of the Concord. It became the most read document in galactic history. The final passage was quoted on worlds that humans had never visited, by species that had never seen a human face, in languages that Earth had never heard. It was carved into monument walls and projected onto the sides of buildings. It was taught in schools and whispered in temples, and printed on the hulls of ships that carried hope into the dark. It read, "To survive a death world is remarkable. To remain kind after surviving it is miraculous." Humanity did not merely endure their world, they carried it with them. And in doing so, they carried us all. Far away, at the edge of the Orion Arm, the planet Earth turned slowly in the light of its small yellow star. It was blue and green, and scarred and beautiful, and mountains and fire. A world that had tried to kill everything on it for 4 billion years, and had only succeeded in making life more stubborn. Around it now, among the old human satellites and space stations, new ships orbited, silver and gold, and colors that had no human name. Traders, diplomats, scientists, artists, and curious travelers from across the galaxy, drawn to the strange and terrible world that had produced the strangest and most terrible and most wonderful species any of them had ever known. The galaxy had held its breath for 90,000 years, afraid of what might crawl out of the dark. And then the humans emerged, and they brought the light with them.